would turn into be the biggest movie ever at the time, and so nobody was anticipating it to be this big hit. Kenner had signed on to be the licensee for the toy line, but they really hadn't planned anything for the initial movie. They thought, maybe later on, if there was a TV show or something like that, they might be able to get some things in, kind of like it had been done with Planet of the Apes and a few other lines like that. But really, there hadn't been anything up until that point like Star Wars. And since it takes about a year for from the original designs to the final product of a lot of these toys, it was really about 1978 before things came out. But that's how it all kind of started. So collecting today, it's kind of evolved over the years. Initially, the stuff was not designed for collectors. It was designed for kids. It was designed for fans. And it was a very, very long time before you really had anything designed with a collector in mind. So there's several different types of collectors today. Completists, initially that's pretty much what everybody was. You just wanted everything that there was to Star Wars. You go out and you buy the action figures, you buy the puzzles, you buy the posters and the trading cards and the glasses and mugs and everything. And eventually that became way too daunting of a task, as you can see by this book. To be a completist is very, very difficult, and there's only a couple of us left in the world. So over time, people have kind of changed their collecting habits, so they become more character-focused, or they may become more movie-focused, or just a specific country. There's a lot of people that will collect all the items, but just from the country that they are from, or that they really like, or they just like 21B, so they want everything that's got 21B on it. But then they have to fight all the other 21B collectors for it, so it becomes very difficult. But one of the interesting things and unique things about Star Wars collecting is its global appeal. It truly is a worldwide phenomenon. You have people in just every country that are Star Wars fans and Star Wars collectors. And so you can see wherever you go, these people that really love Star Wars, and that's fairly unique among Star Wars collecting. The other thing that's unique is that it's multi-generational. You only have to look out in the halls and see everyone from infants to old people, and you've got the gamut covered. There's something that appeals to everyone about Star Wars. At the Star Wars concert yesterday, if any of you were at that, it was just interesting to see all of the people that were there, the different backgrounds and ages and levels of interest. They were all there because they all enjoyed Star Wars. And then finally, they're very informed and detail-oriented. So you have people that really, really get into their area of collecting, and they'll spend a lot of time tracking down, if you collect the Kenner toys, there's people that will find the people that worked on the projects at Kenner and begin to talk to them and get into how these things were made, how the things were marketed, all of the history behind them. What were some of the things that they thought about making but didn't? What are some of the things that, how did this story get made? How did this action figure get chosen over another action figure? And things like that. And those are all kind of unique to Star Wars collecting. You really don't have that in some of the other areas of of other collectors.
Yeah, and a lot of times you'll rub elbows with collectors of other licenses, and you'll find that the Star Wars collectors just know it at a level beyond these other licenses. Like, so for example, like in posters or in cereal boxes or some of the areas that we delve in, you'll find that the people collecting it for like Star Trek or G.I. Joe or Galactic or something else, that Star Wars collectors really raise the bar and do just way more research in general, and really, so there's a lot of information because of the popularity of it. Yeah, and so there's for many of you probably are aware of some of these resources, but there's some great online resources and book resources and communities that you can use to learn about Star Wars collecting. We don't go into the whole thing in this talk, but here's some highlights. So there's some online forums in places like Rebel Scum. So many of you are probably familiar with Rebel Scum. It's got a lot of categories on different collecting topics, from everything from like replica props and trading cards to vintage action figures. So pretty much every category of collectible is covered in that. And also there are forums for different countries and local communities of collecting. StarWarsCards.net, if you focus on trading cards, this is an excellent site that has forums. It has a database of different trading cards from every country, so it's just a very tightly focused site on a pretty popular area of collecting. For replica prop collectors, there's the RPF, Replica Prop Forum, and Star Wars Collectors Archive, which is a site I put together years back, which has really a virtual museum type site. You can actually learn a lot about collecting from eBay. Most of you probably peruse eBay and buy things on eBay occasionally. That is kind of underrated as a resource for learning a lot about collectibles as you read listings, and you can't believe everything that's posted on eBay, but it is the premier marketplace right now for secondary market for Star Wars collectibles. Also, local collecting groups. There, you can learn about these on the Rebel Scum forums. So there's a section in Rebel Scum forums about different groups in different areas of the world, and these groups are vary widely, and some of them will do barbecues, have a regular monthly meeting at a restaurant, will meet in collectors' homes, and it runs the whole range of trading stuff among themselves, trading information, going to local events together, hosting shows. There's just a whole bunch of stuff, and you can learn about a lot of that on Rebel Scum. And then there's some groups, if you just search the web, you can find out about groups. Almost every area of the U.S. has some collecting group nearby.
And if you're local, there's 3 or 4 groups here that are set up today that have tables. So if you just find them and ask them, what it is that you're up to. So you're probably, aware of those as well. And then just briefly, so Star Wars Celebration is also a great resource. If you've been to those events, there's we usually put on a multi-day collecting panels with topics with really the leaders in collecting across many categories, and so that's if you want to learn in-depth information about various topics in collecting, that's a great place to go. In addition to, of course, all the memorabilia that they sell at the show. And you can always check Star Wars Insider, has regular articles as well. There are other magazines, some of the action figure magazines have some great articles on collecting. So then, what we're going to do is talk a little bit about kind of what Duncan and I collect. We have kind of different areas we focus on. So Duncan mentioned he's a completist, and I'm probably to categorize my collection, it's really categories that I focus on. So cast and crew items is one. So the overall theme in my collection is unusual stuff people generally don't know about, the kind of underdocumented or undocumented stuff, and sometimes it's one-of-a-kind stuff, sometimes it's just stuff people don't know about. So cast and crew items are one of those where it presents that challenge, because a lot of this stuff isn't documented. You'll have, the film crew, sometimes it'll be like the sound unit will make 10 t-shirts for that group, and then they'll give them out, and then that's it. There's only 10 of those t-shirts in existence, and so there's no master list of these. You learn the information by talking to people who work on the films and then finding out about some of the items. Some of them are better known, like the parka in the upper left is a Norwegian crew jacket. Everybody who went to Finse, Norway to film The Empire Strikes Back got one of these suits, and you see it in a lot of behind-the-scenes shots for Empire Strikes Back. People are wearing that outfit. The lower left are the Blue Harvest items. So Blue Harvest was this name that they used when they were filming Return of the Jedi, or what was called then Revenge of the Jedi, in the United States. So they knew they were taking a big risk doing a Star Wars movie in the U.S., that they would have press and fans and thousands of people trying to watch it. So they created this fake name Blue Harvest and actually did a whole logo. Although the logo looks like a Star Wars logo, so I never thought it disguised it very well. But they made a whole bunch of stuff just for the crew with this Blue Harvest logo. So for cast and crew collectors is a big deal, and so one of the things they go after. But they made cast and crew items for every film. They're continuing to make it for Clone Wars. So there's a lot of stuff that just folks who worked on the movies and on the TV shows have access to. And so it's one of the areas I love to dive into because there's little that's known about it. Movie props is another area that really over the last 10 years I've started to develop. I had a few items I picked up here and there, but as started my taste evolve, like every collector's, start to pick up a few things. So just a couple highlights there. There's an Ewok mask in the upper right corner I got from a guy who was an Ewok in the films.
Lower left are some R2 pieces from Empire Strikes Back. The upper left are Tarkin's trousers from A New Hope, so the Peter Cushing's trousers, and they even have, like, you can see scuff marks on the knees where his boots rubbed into the pants. And lower right is a moisture evaporator from when they filmed episode 1 in Tunisia. I actually brought this thing back from Tunisia, but I think we get to that a little later in the talk, but this thing is like about 200 pounds, so it was not an easy thing to bring back halfway across the world. And then in the middle there is the Death Star model from A New Hope, so one of the prized pieces of my collection. That's it sitting in our house. It's actually on loan right now to the Science Fiction Museum in Seattle, but it's the one 3D model they made for A New Hope for the Death Star. So one of the areas I also focus on are like unproduced toys and toy prototypes, and I have a talk on this later today where we kind of just spend the whole time kind of diving into this area. But what I love about this is that you get to learn about toy concepts that were considered, but for whatever reason, like it was too expensive to make the toy, or they lost interest in a particular line, they decided not to do it. And so it's kind of like if you're really into the action figures or into the toy line, it's kind of like what would have happened had the toy line continued. And so that's one of the areas I've spent many years kind of focusing on. So these are some examples from my collection. There's some unproduced 12-inch action figures in the upper left. Talking Yoda doll. They had some different kind of plush Yoda toys they considered for Empire Strikes Back. One was a pull-string Yoda and another a hand puppet. It was very different from the hand puppet they released. A micro collection playset is kind of fun where you get to incinerate C-3PO on a conveyor belt, and then there's also like a little chair where you torture Han. So they didn't release the Bespin torture chamber. And I'll talk more about these topics later today. And then lower right is a droid's C-3PO storage case for action figures that they made for the droid series, but it was another thing they wanted to take the Return of the Jedi concept and then repitch it for droids, but they never released it. And then this is me in my cereal room. So one of my favorite areas is cereal box collecting. I have a room in the house that's just Star Wars cereal boxes, and I have over 1,300 cereal boxes in this room. It's amazing that they made so many cereals. Over 80 countries now have been represented with Star Wars cereals. And most recently for the Clone Wars promotion, there were, from all over, mostly in Europe, but in other parts of the world, they had cereal for that. So they continue with new Star Wars promotions, and this cereal room gets more and more crowded as the time goes on.
Well, I, as a completist, go for everything. But one of the areas that I really enjoy is food packaging and displays, the premiums and things like that associated with all of the food merchandising. I think it's interesting just because it's so unique usually to each country. It can be very colorful, and it can also be very challenging to track down some of the original packaging. For example, the Sundown Supper TV dinner there, that's the only known example of Star Wars TV dinner tray, that has survived. Nobody has any of the packaging on that. So it's just kind of unique, have, all kinds of things from, South Africa to Japan to Romania to the United States. And no, I don't save any of the food. So like the Star Tours milk there is not milk cottage cheese now from 1987 or something. But the problem was I was running out of room. It was it can take over, as you can imagine, 30 plus years worth of collecting. And so it just filled up every little inch of our house. So what we had to do was to build a place so that I could start displaying all my stuff. So it's finally starting to come together. You can see there we've actually put together the Jungle Gym from 1984. And Jar Jar is manning that one along with the little Ewok there. But it's just kind of real exciting to me now to finally get to have all of my stuff out and displayed, and beginning to get that all unpacked and go to town with that. So one of the fun things that Gus and I have done as we've worked on this is we've traveled a lot. We both really enjoy traveling. It's one of the things that we enjoy doing, and getting to experience new cultures. And see the history of sites and the natural wonders and things like that. And so Star Wars collecting has taken us around the world, or I guess we've gone around the world, and while we've been there, done Star Wars collecting, both. But these are all countries that we have visited together. We individually, we also have been to several other countries, but together we've been to all of these countries, and in every single one of those we've actually found Star Wars stuff.
What's interesting is in many of these countries, like there's always a thriving Star Wars collecting community. Like we think in the U.S. as like sometimes that it's the only place where there's this much interest, but in many other countries there's just as much a level of collecting and fandom, which I think has been very fascinating to see. And as Duncan mentioned, these are just a list of countries where we've done conventions or gone looking for Star Wars collectibles, just looking in bookstores or toy shops and all that. There are many other countries who've individually also gone and looked in that would more than double this list.
One of the stories that we did when we were in Poland, if you can imagine, you know, a lot of the countries will do the books in their own language. So every country we go to, there's a whole new range of all of the Star Wars fiction that I need to get. So when we were in Poland, I made pack mules out of all of the people that were traveling with us. So here's my wife and Gus and his wife, each with just armloads of books as we were running around trying to catch the train and things like that. So I appreciate your help on that. But even in Moldova, which, you know, how many people can even find Moldova on a map, we found Star Wars items. So.
Yeah, so we have, what to show you, you know, I think a lot of the fun of collecting is not just owning the stuff, it's just the adventures in finding the items. And so, you know, like many collectors, there's some great stories about, you know, how we found items. And so this is from taken, when episode 2 came out, they had a big promotion in Mexico. And we've been scouring the supermarkets to find all the cereal boxes and so on, you know, being into cereal stuff, I was looking for them. And then we discovered that Costco had a unique size and brands of cereals there too. So we went to Costco in Mexico, and we filled like, I don't know, I think it was like 4 or 5 shopping carts of cereal boxes, because there were a whole bunch of us there that all wanted all 12 boxes. And there were these huge, we call it Costco-sized boxes. One thing that's interesting is your Costco card actually works in Mexico, which I didn't find out until I was down there. But anyway, we left with all this cereal, but then we're like, what are we going to do with the food? And there we ran into this woman who was like, you know, associated with a charity, and took all our just bags of cereal. So we flattened all these boxes and we're just putting it in her car for a charity. And so it was great because we're, you know, there's all this wasted food because we don't normally eat all this stuff. In fact, one of them you wouldn't want to eat. It was Nestle Crunch cereal, which I think would get you sick if you ate it. And so anyway, we gave all this away to charity.
It was just really kind of funny because, you know, here we have all these carts of just cereal, you know, lined up in the checkout line. And this lady's like, you know, do you really like cereal, or, you know, what is the deal? And so we explained that we were just collecting and we really just wanted the boxes. And so that's when she told us this charity, and she said, you know, we never get cereal for these people because it's always so expensive. So, you know, for the kids that, you know, live on the streets and, you know, homeless and things like that, so they're like, she was just blown away that we were going to, you know, give her all of this cereal because it was a special treat for them because they didn't get that normally. And so she actually went out to the radio station and, you know, gave all of our names and all this stuff. It was just kind of funny that, but it was cool that we had been able to give them the food, and then we got to take our little boxes back home with us.
So this is my friend Earl and I bought a Pepsi, episode 1 Pepsi machine locally. I got it, I don't know how we got it into his van, but this is, I'm at one end of the van pushing this like, what seemed like an 800-pound Pepsi machine. This was funny because after, it was bad enough getting it out of this van, we then got it up onto the sidewalk, and then we realized we were unable to lift it and get into the house. So it's sitting on the sidewalk, and it starts snowing while we're trying to load this Pepsi machine. And eventually we figured out some way to kind of push it into the house. But what I thought was going to be a simple thing ended up being kind of a complex thing, and gave me a bigger appreciation for what, you know, goes into like setting up Pepsi machines. But anyway, it was now we have this huge, you know, episode 1 Pepsi machine in the house. This is from the last JediCon convention. This is Duncan and I went to this. JediCon's this great convention they hold in Germany every like 3 years or so. They have one coming up this spring, and they had a band, this awesome band that was doing. They were basically doing lip syncing to, and I guess they were actually it was lip sync, right? It was all lip sync to AC/DC tunes and other like heavy metal tunes and stuff. And so the Wampa was just awesome. And this we posed with the Wampa the day later, but that's the Wampa doing his like guitar solos. He signed little autograph photos for people. So that's just kind of fun stuff. The Wampa guitar is one of the highlights in my collecting years.
Darth Maul was one of the lead singers, and they had these Twilight dancers as backup group, and a Jawa doing drums or something. It was very surreal seeing them doing AC/DC and Rammstein and some of those kinds of things. For episode 1, several of us went down to Tijuana to look for all of the Sabritas and different food premiums that they had, the Pizza Hut and KFC, and you remember all the ad nauseum, with emphasis on the nauseum, of all of the fast food and all the different food products that they had. So we went down to get the Mexican versions, and we had this interesting time down there. We found these piñatas and got those. And then coming back across the border, we didn't have enough people, or there weren't enough seats for everybody. So my wife and I actually ended up in the back of this cab of a truck with these big piñatas and bags of potato chips and all this sort of thing. And at customs, the guy it's dark, and he just lifts up the cab, looks inside. So here we are. Here's these 2 huge piñatas, 3 huge piñatas that could have been filled with anything, and hundreds of bags of potato chips and stuff like that. And he says, "Are you all American?" "Yes." "Okay." That was it. So anyway, kind of an interesting note. The guy in the middle there with the bunny ears behind him is the first winner of the Amazing Race, and so we actually got to go down with him. This was prior to the Amazing Race. This was the first time he'd actually been out of the country, right? Yeah. And he had not been out of the country before this, so we figured that we kind of helped him in his quest